Picture a person at the very bottom of the climb, almost nothing in the bank. And for that person, a flat tire is not an inconvenience. It's a catastrophe. It's a ruined month. It's a frantic scramble. Which bill doesn't get paid? Whose money can I borrow? Do I have to choose between the tire and groceries this week? One small, stupid, ordinary piece of bad luck, and their entire life wobbles. Now follow that same person up the climb and watch what happens. Because at some point, quietly, without any ceremony, that exact same flat tire stops being a catastrophe and becomes a mild annoyance. A thing they handle on a Tuesday and forget by Thursday. Keep climbing, and a job loss stops being pure terror and becomes a stressful but survivable inconvenience. Keep going, and eventually you reach the strangest line of all, the one almost nobody talks about, where money quietly stops being the invisible hand steering every single decision you make, where it stops running your life. Here's what almost everyone gets wrong about that climb. They think it's a smooth ramp that $100,000 just feels like a slightly bigger version of $1,000. It doesn't. Money doesn't change your life gradually. It changes it in sudden jumps, at specific hidden thresholds. And at each one, the way money feels flips completely. My name is Nick, and today we're gonna map those thresholds, the exact lines where money stops controlling you one at a time. And I need to say one thing right away, before your brain jumps to the worst place. No, the answer is not that you need to be a millionaire to be free. That's the lie the whole culture tells you. And it's the reason so many people give up before they start, because they're staring at some distant, impossible peak and thinking, well, I'll never get there, so why bother? Here's the truth I want you to hold on to for the whole video. The earliest thresholds, the small, close, humble ones, deliver the single biggest jump in peace you will ever feel. The culture points you at the last line. The magic is mostly in the first one. So stick with me, because by the end, you're gonna know exactly which line you're standing just below right now. Let's start with the illusion, because it's the thing quietly torturing people who are actually doing fine. Most people evaluate their money as a single endless number, and they compare it to an imaginary finish line so far away it may as well be the moon. And because that number never feels big enough, they feel like they're failing permanently, no matter how much progress they actually make. But that's not how money works on a human being. Money doesn't affect your life in proportion to how big the number is. It affects your life at thresholds, specific points where crossing over changes not your bank balance, but your entire relationship with fear. And the jumps between those thresholds are enormous, while the space in between them barely moves the needle on how you feel. Understanding this one idea changes everything, because it means you stop chasing a number and start chasing lines. So let's cross the first one. And it is, without exaggeration, the most important line in this entire video. The first threshold is the buffer. It's not a fortune. It's the modest, unglamorous pile of money that stands between you and disaster. A few $1,000s, sometimes less, sitting in an account, doing nothing exciting, just existing. And here's why it's the most powerful threshold of them all. Below this line, you live in a state of low, constant financial terror, whether you consciously feel it or not. Every unexpected expense is a threat. Every month is a tightrope. Your nervous system is quietly braced all the time for the next small disaster. And the moment you cross this line, the moment you have even a small buffer, that background terror just switches off. The flat tire becomes a Tuesday. The surprise bill becomes annoying instead of terrifying. You sleep differently. You breathe differently. And here's the part that should genuinely change how you think about all of this. That jump from nothing to a small buffer is the biggest single improvement in well-being that money will ever buy you. Bigger than the jump from comfortable to rich. Bigger than the jump from rich to wealthy. The distance from drowning to standing on solid ground is the most valuable few $1,000s you will ever accumulate. And it's also, for most people, the closest and most reachable line on the entire map. The culture never talks about this threshold because it's small and boring, but it's where almost all of the peace actually lives. Think about what's actually happening to your brain below that line, because this isn't just a money problem, it's a survival mode problem. When you have no buffer, Part of your mind is permanently occupied running background threat calculations. What if the car breaks? What if the hours get cut? What if the rent goes up? That constant, low-grade vigilance is exhausting, and it quietly steals focus from everything else: your work, your relationships, your sleep, your ability to even think clearly about money. So the buffer doesn't just protect your bank account. It frees up a huge chunk of your mental energy that was being burned every single day, just bracing for impact. People cross this line and describe it the same way over and over. They say it feels like they can finally breathe, like a weight they'd stopped noticing was suddenly gone. That's not the money. That's their nervous system standing down for the first time in years. Now, let's cross the second line, because once the terror is gone, something new becomes possible. The second threshold is breathing room. This is where you've gotten past the bare buffer and built up enough that you can start making decisions from a position of strength instead of fear. And this changes you in a way that's hard to describe until you've felt it. Below this line, your choices are made by your circumstances. You take the job because you need it. You stay because you can't afford to leave. You say yes to things you hate because saying no feels too dangerous. But once you cross into breathing room, you start making choices because you actually chose them. You can walk away from a toxic boss. You can wait for the right opportunity instead of grabbing the first desperate one. You can take a small risk because a small failure won't destroy you. Money, at this threshold, stops being a cage and starts being a little bit of leverage. You're not free yet, but for the first time, you're negotiating with life instead of just accepting its terms. And this threshold does something sneaky and wonderful to your earning power too. Because once you can make choices from strength, you actually start making better money decisions, not worse ones. The person living in terror takes the first job offered, accepts the lowball salary, never asks for the raise, because the fear of losing what little they have makes them play small and defensive. But the person with breathing room can hold out for the better offer, can negotiate hard because walking away is genuinely on the table, can take the calculated risk that leads somewhere bigger. So breathing room isn't just more comfortable. It quietly makes you wealthier because fear is expensive and security pays. The very buffer that calmed your nervous system also turns you into a sharper, braver, more effective version of yourself in every money decision you make from that point forward. Fear shrinks people. A little security lets them stand up to their full height. And look, if this is landing, if you're placing yourself on this map right now and feeling something loosen a little, that exact clarity is why I built a school community. It's where I break down how I take this kind of research and turn it into a faceless YouTube channel that actually grows. The digging, the scripting, the whole system, step by step. No gatekeeping, no upsell. If you've ever thought about building something of your own out of this exact kind of curiosity, the links are in the description. Come hang out. Now let's cross the third threshold, because this is where the whole game quietly changes, and most people never even notice it happening. The third threshold is the crossover, the point where your money starts working as hard as you do. For your entire life up to this line, you have been the engine. Every dollar you earned came from trading your time and effort for it. But somewhere along the climb, if you've been putting money into things that grow investments, quietly compounding in the background, you cross a line where those investments start generating real, meaningful money on their own, money you didn't work for that day. And at first, it's small, a trickle. But there's a specific, almost magical moment where the amount your money earns for you in a year starts to rival what a decent chunk of your own labor earns. That's the crossover. That's the point where you stop being the only engine and your accumulated wealth becomes a second engine, running silently all day, all night, whether you're working, sleeping, or on vacation. You've quietly gone from being purely a worker to being partly an owner. And owners are in a completely different trajectory than workers. This is the threshold where the climb starts to accelerate on its own. And here's why this one accelerates when the earlier ones didn't. Below this line, your progress was entirely limited by your own two hands. You could only save what you could earn, one paycheck at a time. And it felt like pushing a boulder uphill. But once your money starts earning meaningful money, the boulder starts rolling on its own. The returns get reinvested, which makes the pile bigger, which makes next year's returns bigger, which makes the pile bigger still. It compounds. So the climb from threshold 3 to threshold 4 is nothing like the grinding climb from the bottom, because now you've got help, silent, tireless, mathematical help working underneath you the whole time. This is the stage where people who kept quietly investing for years suddenly look up and realize their wealth is growing faster than they could ever save, and that the finish line they thought was decades away just started rushing toward them. And that acceleration leads, eventually, to the final line, the one this whole video is named after. The fourth threshold is independence. And here's the thing, nobody tells you about it. It is not a specific dollar amount, it's a ratio. It's the point where the money your assets generate on their own, quietly, in the background, is enough to cover the entire cost of your life. That's it. That's the whole definition. When your investments throw off enough every year to pay for the way you live, you have crossed the line where money stops controlling you, because you no longer have to trade your time for it to survive. Work becomes a choice. Every decision you make stops being filtered through the question, can I afford this? The invisible hand that has been steering your life since the day you got your first job finally, quietly lets go of the wheel. And notice what that means, because it's the key to the entire thing. Independence is a ratio between what your assets produce and what your life costs. There are two ways to reach it, not one. You can spend your whole life trying to make the top number enormous, or you can also work on the bottom number, the cost of your life. The person with modest needs reaches this threshold far, far sooner than the person with an expensive life, even if the expensive person has way more money. Which is why some people are free on an amount that would terrify a big spender. And some people with genuinely large fortunes never feel free at all because their lifestyle grew even faster than their wealth. The line isn't about being rich. It's about the gap between what you have working for you and what your life demands. And this is the part that should quietly excite you, because it means freedom is partly in your hands, in a way the culture never admits. Everyone treats the cost of their life as fixed as just what it costs to be them. And so they assume the only path to freedom is the brutal one. Get the top number huge. But every time you lower the real cost of your life, whether that's a paid off home, modest tastes, or just refusing to let every raise inflate your spending, you drag that finish line closer to you. You're not just saving money, you're literally shrinking the size of the fortune you need to be free. Two people can hit independence at wildly different net worths, purely because one of them quietly kept their life affordable. The big spender is chasing a finish line that keeps sprinting away from them, while the person living modestly is walking calmly toward one that's coming to meet them halfway. So let me be completely fair and make the strongest case for the other side, because the number is not the whole story, and I'd be lying if I pretended it was. Here's the honest complication. Money buys the ability to be free, but it does not automatically buy the feeling of being free. There are people who have crossed every threshold I just described, who have genuine financial independence, and who still wake up every morning gripped by money anxiety, because the fear was never really about the number. It became a habit, a wiring in the brain that a bigger bank balance doesn't automatically rewrite. And on the flip side, there are people quite low on this climb who have made a kind of peace with money, who feel calmer at threshold 1 than some wealthy people feel at threshold 4. So the thresholds are real. They matter enormously. But they're the external half of the equation. The internal half, your relationship with money, your ability to actually feel the safety you've built, is a separate climb, and you have to do both. The number opens the door. You still have to be willing to walk through it and believe you're allowed to feel safe. So let me compress this whole thing into 3 beats, in case you drifted off somewhere around the crossover. Money doesn't change your life on a smooth ramp. It changes it in sudden jumps at specific thresholds. The earliest one, the small buffer, delivers the biggest jump in peace you'll ever feel, and it's the closest. And the final line, real freedom isn't a fortune. It's a ratio between what your assets produce and what your life costs. Jumps, not a ramp. The first line matters most. Freedom is a ratio. So here's what to actually do with this. And it's the opposite of what the culture screams at you. Stop staring at the final peak. Stop torturing yourself with the enormous, distant number that represents full independence. Because staring at it just makes you feel hopeless, and small and hopeless people don't build anything. Instead, aim at the very next line. If you have nothing, your entire focus, the only thing that matters is crossing the first threshold, building that small, boring, life-changing buffer, because it will buy you more peace per dollar than any milestone that comes after it. Then the next line, then the next. You climb this thing one threshold at a time, and each one you cross permanently upgrades the texture of your daily life in a way you actually feel. And here's the quietly hopeful part. Because the thresholds are lines and not a smooth ramp, you are always closer to the next meaningful jump than you think. You might be one modest push away from crossing from terror into buffer, from fear into breathing room, and that crossing will feel enormous, even if the number is small. You're not staring up at an impossible mountain. You're standing just below a specific, reachable line. And the moment you step over it, part of the weight you've been carrying your whole life just lifts. So think about that climber one last time, the one who started at the bottom, where a flat tire could ruin a month. They didn't get free in one giant leap. Nobody does. They got free by crossing one quiet line at a time and feeling the fear loosen its grip a little more with each one. The person at the top, the one for whom money finally stopped controlling anything, is the exact same person who once panicked over a tire. They just kept crossing lines until one day they looked up and realized the invisible hand that had steered their whole life had quietly let go, and they were driving themselves at last. Because that was always the real prize, and it was never about being rich. It was about crossing the line where money stops being the thing that decides your day. Rich was just the word the culture gave you, so you chase the wrong threshold and miss how close the right one really was. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Forget the final peak. Forget the millionaire fantasy. Which threshold are you standing just below right now, at this very moment? And have you been staring so hard at the distant line that you never notice how close you are to crossing the next one, the one that would actually change how tomorrow feels? Sit with that one. And if you want to figure it out alongside other people doing the same thing, you already know where I'll be. I'll see you in the next one.